Tonight, it is all about the law, and Lord, is there a lot to talk about. The Russia probe heating up. Bob Mueller, another cooperating witness on his hands, and he's also reportedly looking at whether or not our president knew about those hacked DNC emails before the news became public. That one's shocking. Fellow Republicans as well as more. Then, as kids and teachers return to Stoneman Douglas High School in Florida, the gun debate, it rages on. We will take a look at what the president is now saying he'd like to do, and it includes confiscating some guns. Also, the defense giving its closing arguments in the Prococo case. We will look at the strategy as it tries to clear the former top Cuomo aide. Good evening, everybody. We're going to get to that and a lot more in what will be a very busy hour here. Welcome to RFL. I'm Richard French. Yet another high-level defection from the Trump White House. Just a few minutes ago, Communications Director Hope Hicks handed in her resignation effective in a couple of weeks. She plans to be out of the White House really before the end of March here. Now, this comes just a day after she testified before the House Intelligence Committee and told the panel that her job was to sometimes tell, in her words, white lies. That would be a no-no. But Hicks told the committee she never lied about anything connected to the Russia investigation. As they say, stay tuned. Now, speaking of that investigation, Bob Mueller, reportedly, he's now looking at the hack into the DNC, and more specifically, the president. Now, remember when Donald Trump said this during the campaign?
Russia, if you're listening, I hope you're able to find the 30,000 emails that are missing. I think you will probably be rewarded mightily by our press.
Funny then, disturbing now. Special counsel Bob Mueller, well, he sure remembers when Trump said that. Mueller now reportedly asking witnesses whether Trump was aware before the news became public the Democratic emails had been hacked. In effect, who knew what and when. He's also looking at whether or not Trump knew about their eventual release by WikiLeaks. The plot thickens. They're also questioning my interpretation, this clown, whether or not former Trump advisor Roger Stone had a relationship with WikiLeaks. Now, you will remember the U.S. intelligence agency said that the Russians stole those emails. This is so big because it points to Mueller ramping up the collusion case, not obstruction now. Let's get into it with our legal panel. Jim Coe Soros, criminal defense attorney in Manhattan. He sits on the board of directors of the New York City Criminal Bar Associations, frequently lecturing at New York Law School and the bar associations in Queens and New York City. Ben Gershman, he's a professor at Pace Law School, also an author, I may add. Mayo Bartlett, an attorney at the law offices of Mayo Bartlett PLLC, and also the former chief of the Bias Crimes Unit at the Westchester County DA's office. And we're joined by former federal prosecutor Daniel Goldman. All right, guys. First, let's play, armchair quarterbacks here on the Hope Hicks thing, because I'm going to count this. We don't know why she resigned here, except it is quite coincidental that just yesterday she went before the House Intel Committee, but not reportedly. She more than once had to step out and call the White House to see which questions she could and couldn't answer. And then reportedly we learned today that because she wasn't forthcoming, a subpoena might be coming, whether or not she has executive privilege that would extend to her. And also people were telling her, and she's all of 29, I may add, without any political experience, I'm going to call your dad if you don't get an attorney. Literally, those conversations are happening in the Wild West of the White House. So, to that, guys, is it just somebody who's looking to move on to another stage in their career, or is this potentially, if not likely, intertwined with the investigation? Mr. Coe Soros.
Well, she could just be deciding that it's just too stressful for her and she just doesn't want to be in this position anymore as things get ramped up. Resigning is not going to extricate her from the inquiry or the questioning that's going to come.
But it will mean that she won't, for example, have to be assigned counsel that's attached at all to the White House. She'll get her own counsel, and she'll have her own self-interest here, potentially. So, as you're right, it doesn't go away. She is looking out for number one, clearly, going forward.
Look, I have to tell you something. If I'm her advisor, I'm telling her to get independent counsel whether she works there or not, because there's something almost unseemly about one department getting lawyers for everybody, and that everybody may have interests that conflict with each other. So she should have her own independent lawyer regardless.
And let's remember exposure here. She was there throughout the entire campaign. She was the one who wrote that infamous memo, or was party to, where Trump basically said, yeah, that meeting in Trump Tower, it was all about the adoptions here, the Mesniak Act, when obviously it was a meeting that we all now know was to get dirt on Hillary, etc. She was party and saw a whole lot of stuff. So if anybody ever decided to play ball with Mr. Mueller, you would think that she was privy to information of interest to the special prosecutor.
You know, according to Michael Wolff in his book Fire and Fury, Hope Hicks was about as close to Donald Trump as anybody. I mean, it's the way he almost looked at her as his daughter. I mean, she was right there with respect to every major issue that ever happened. She was there, closer to him than anybody. And, you know, maybe she feels the heat. I mean, she did suggest that she tells white lies. Maybe she feels that this is the time to jump ship.
And free piece of advice to everybody. I wouldn't tell white lies to federal investigators, let alone when you're before Congress.
Is that a misdemeanor, Dan?
And I just played a turn on TV, unlike the other guys. All right, Dan, next is Gates. Yet another guy who's going to be a cooperating witness, but guilty, he's working. Go up the food chain for me, the significance, what that means for Manafort, and then consequently even farther up to the biggest fish.
Well, I think for Manafort, it means Manafort's cooked. Given the allegations alleged in the indictment, which are set forth in quite a lot of detail, there's a lot of evidence even without
And just
Gates.
one piece of information for folks who didn't see. Manafort has pled not guilty. He has a trial date set for September, but I'm sorry, go ahead.
Right, and so now that Gates is cooperating, he was just going to lead the jury through all of that written evidence, explain everything. He was Manafort's right-hand man for years and years. But that brings us to the bigger question is, as Manafort's right-hand man, what does Gates himself know about anything that went on in the campaign? You don't need Manafort to flip in order to get access to what Manafort knows.
So you don't think the end game, if you had to guess from now, whether it was through the money laundering or whatever else, they're not trying to say, hey, listen, you're a 70-year-old guy here, Manafort. We've got you cooked. You're looking at 30 years, basically a life sentence here if we get the conviction. Flip, or they don't even need him to flip because Gates is the access to the intel.
No, of course they would want that. They would absolutely want that. But I guess what I'm trying to say is that even without that, you can get access to a lot of Manafort's information because he was so close to Gates. If Manafort was talking to Gates about the Trump Tower meeting in June of 2016 and told Gates what happens, and they are conspiring together, then Gates can get on the witness stand and talk about what Manafort told him about the conspiracy, and that's admissible evidence. So, of course, they would love to keep rolling up the chain and get Manafort and see what Manafort knows, because he obviously had meetings that Gates would not have been in. But remember, Gates also lasted a lot longer than Manafort. Yep. So this is a significant development as to the broader investigation to have Gates cooperate in and of itself. Manafort now, I think we sort of move to the side, except for whether or not he is going to cooperate. He may not feel that way, of course, but generally speaking, I think from our sort of legal analysis, what Gates's cooperation in conjunction with Flynn's cooperation is going to reveal to Mueller's team a whole lot of important information.
And Mayo, yet another development, and that was the Schiff Memo. For people who forget, this was the Democrats' response here to the Republican report saying that the FBI overstepped its bounds, and it had some interesting things to say about Carter Page. I know a lot of people said, oh, well, it finally came out, whatever, tit for tat. There was something in here that I don't think got the attention that it warranted because of the timeliness and significance of it. Page, as many remember, a Trump foreign advisor during the campaign. However, the memo says the FBI had interest in Page long before he joined Team Trump. It says Russian agents had tried to recruit him back in 2013, and prosecutors indicted 2 Russian spies who had targeted Page for recruitment. Now, the whole thing started when Republican Devin Nunes congressman here, released his memo saying that the FBI overstepped in its ordering of FISA surveillance. Well, just yesterday, the Attorney General, Jeff Sessions, he asked the nonpartisan Inspector General to look into whether the FBI had abused its power. And, well, a few hours ago, President Trump, again, for his own appointed Attorney General, said, well, I'll read it verbatim here. You can't make this up. Why is AG Jeff Sessions, like he's some random guy, asking the Inspector General to investigate potentially massive FISA abuse? This will take forever, has no prosecutorial power, and already late with reports on Comey, etc. Isn't the IG an Obama guy? Why not use Justice Department lawyers? Disgraceful. And for one, Sessions grew a spine and said something back here. And I read in part, as long as I am the Attorney General, I will continue to discharge my duties with integrity and honor. Okay, a lot to unpack here, but let's first do one thing. The one thing that came out of the Schiff Memo, the people are skating over is they've been looking at Page for a long time. This guy was a person of interest, and he was under surveillance long before all of a sudden the FBI and the Grand Cabal went after him to go get the president, okay? Secondly, the president attacked the process for what, and the IG as to how they're handling it. That's the law, isn't it?
Absolutely, and it's amazing. Anytime you're looking at any significant investigation, whether it's the FBI or it's a state or local even, law enforcement agency, it's a fool's game basically to suggest that there's nothing there before you have all the information. Significant investigations go on for many years. And when you start to look at cases like this, and you have people for political means saying that there's nothing there, it's a nothing burger, all of this stuff, they have no information whatsoever. So even we're talking about what's the significance of Gates. Well, you know, Gates can end up leading you anywhere. You have no idea.
Right.
And each avenue that it leads you to has other avenues. So,
and just coming back, if I could, to what the Attorney General decided to do, to give it to the isn't he, if not required, isn't that the protocol? Isn't that the way it's supposed to be? Aren't we supposed to have basically somebody watching to have a check and balance?
Well, that's the classic, who's watching the watchers? You know, you go back to that, and in order for people to really have any faith in the integrity of the system, you have to have it set up that way.
But why is separation?
Why is Jeff Sessions why does he have any involvement in these memos? He is ostensibly recused from the entire Russia investigation. The Nunes memo and the Schiff memo relate to a FISA warrant as part of this Russia probe. I don't understand at the first place why Jeff Sessions is doing anything in relation.
And I'm going to run out of time. I want to get to a couple
really quick. Hope Hicks, I just forgot to say, she may not want to be present for what comes. She may not want any more information. She just might want to cut it off and not know what's going on in the future.
Well, one more guy in the barrel is Jared Kushner, okay? And his security clearance, it was just downgraded here. But to me, that's not the bigger story. The bigger story is why it's being held up to begin with here. Everybody's talking about, well, what's top secret clearance versus secret? And that's a legitimate point here, to have a functioning, executive office here. But there's a broader issue. I want you to take a listen to what former CIA official Phil Mudd had to say as to why this is raising flags, certainly in the intelligence community.
The significance here, and this is why John Kelly had no option, is that the Deputy Attorney General, as we know from reporting, called over to John Kelly and said, we cannot certify that we've closed the investigation yet. That is code in Washington after 13 months of an accelerated investigation into Jared Kushner's background, that there is something really significant the FBI can't reveal.
You buy that?
Absolutely. I buy it because I think Jared Kushner's been on the hot seat from the very beginning, and this is clearly related, in my view, to the Russia investigation. First, you've got Rosenstein calling over to White House counsel Don McGahn. It's not Jeff Sessions, which I think the ordinary protocol would be, but for the fact that he's recused. And second of all, kind of recused. And second of all, the information that they can't reveal to the White House is not going to be of the sort of he's got a lot of debts or he's got personal loans. It's related to an investigation. I shouldn't necessarily say it's related to the Russia investigation. My guess is it flows out of that. But it is related to some sort of FBI investigation related to Jared Kushner. And it's significant information that is reported that's not going to be able to allow him to get a security clearance. That is a significant signal that there's something going on with him.
It would otherwise take no time at all.
Right.
I mean, it would
But you
have been done.
And
you
the
also
chain of
have to look and see at what point, if Donald Trump wasn't elected president, would he even have security clearance?
That's going down a whole nother rabbit hole I don't want to go. All right, then
But
finally.
don't forget, when Jared Kushner was at the infamous June
Yes.
meeting at Trump Tower with Manna Ford and John, where they were getting dirt from the Russian lawyer
Yep.
about Hillary Clinton. So he's vulnerable in many ways, and there's no question the FBI sees him as a possible colluder.
I saw a piece you wrote, Ben, not long ago in terms of for Politico as to, hey, even if you wanted to make a move on Mueller,
Right.
well, if the president was going to make a move on Mueller, using his own words, it was that bright red line he said where you can't look at my finances or my family's finances. Reportedly, as we speak, Mueller and team are doing just that. They're looking at the finances and the business interests of Trump before the election, going back to his desires to have the Trump Tower, I guess, in Moscow, even going back to when he had the
Miss Universe, the Miss Universe
Miss Universe
contest.
2013 there as well. So the genesis of it, all the unexplained questions, why he's been the unending defender of them and everything else attached, even some of the Kushner things in terms of that. They're clearly looking to follow the money, right?
Follow the money. I mean, that's where Manna Ford and Gates were indicted, and people suspect that that's really it's going to be Trump's undoing.
Now, they're yelling at me in the control room, but really fast, because you wrote about this. If Trump said, it's going to be my bloody Sunday, he's now looking into my finances, he's gone. Forget about the complication as to how he's got to do it, who he's got to fire, go up the food chain. He cans Mueller. Clearly, forget about what Congress does and the constitutional crisis we're thrown into. It doesn't end there, even if Congress doesn't grow a spine, right?
I said that you still have a federal grand jury, both two grand juries in Virginia and D.C. You have a federal judge who's supervising the grand jury. I don't see why the grand jury doesn't have independent power under the judge's supervision to bring a report, and maybe with a federal prosecutor stepping in there, issuing indictments.
And you have states attorney generals that are
and
also
states attorney
involved
generals
in,
also,
in
yeah,
New York and
yeah.
elsewhere.
So it doesn't end even.
They would just replace him. I mean, with another, just like it happened with Nixon. They would replace Mueller, and there'd be somebody else.
But you can't replace the grand jury, and you can't replace the federal judge. And you've heard of runaway grand juries. This is a grand jury that probably would say, listen, we've done a lot of work here. We're not going to let our work be undermined by...
Except, Ben, you have the guidance of the federal prosecutor, so if that person's heart's not in it, then where does it lead?
Right.
I don't know.
And
I don't
that's
know.
the
It's
concern,
uncharted
right?
territory. This is all uncharted territory.
That's the understatement of the hour. All right, coming up next here, a lot of talk about guns, but so far, no action. But today, and I got to tell you, riveting television, the president in front of live cameras with lawmakers of both parties spoke about, among other things, confiscating some guns and then worrying about the legality of it afterwards. I can't make this up. I'll give you some of the highlights or lowlights, depending on your perspective, and the panel will weigh in.